Welcome to the Value Cultures podcast. I'm Daryl Ogden, one of the co-founders of Value Cultures. On this pod, we explore the world of gaming with some of the industry's most accomplished, creative, and inspiring leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome Heather Hazen, the studio head of Firaxis Games. Maryland-based Firaxis, part of Take-Two Interactive and the 2K publishing portfolio, is the maker of the beloved Civilization franchise. It's great to see you today, Heather. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, Daryl. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. One of the things that we love to do as a starter in these conversations that we have with your colleagues in the industry is just tell us a little bit about how you got into gaming. The thing that we would note about the industry is that there's no standard way into it. There's no normal progression into gaming, and there's so many different stories. So we just love to start off by hearing about that today.
Yeah, sure. I think I follow the trend of not entering gaming through some very clear path or trajectory. I graduated from college and then moved down to Atlanta because I was interested in working in entertainment. And so Turner Entertainment was close and it seemed like a good place to start. So I just went to the temp worker office and went back every single day until they assigned me to work at CartoonNetwork.com, which ages me a little to know that I started my career working on a website that had not yet launched. I have a degree in English and communications. My first assignment was to write copy for CartoonNetwork.com.
As a fellow English major, I appreciate the creativity and the can-do-itiveness. If you've got a good, solid English education like you received at Wake Forest, you can do anything. I believe it. So if somebody had told you when you first stood in that line and said, hey, I'm not going away, I'll just be back tomorrow to get my job. But if they had told you that this is where you would be today in games, you might have been surprised. Tell us a little bit more about the migration into games at Cartoon Network, because that wasn't obviously your original gig.
It was not. Turns out that 9 to 14-year-old boys who are the main demographic for Cartoon Network shows and the website don't care too much about reading. We learned over the course of a couple of years that interactive entertainment was where the industry was going. So we started making Flash games. It made sense for someone that was already there to help support that. So that's when I got my first gig as an associate producer of interactive media for CartoonNetwork.com.
Yeah. The very smart, resilient, creative people that go into games, if they don't have a natural pathway, it's production is so often what that entry point is. But you enter into this production role, but then that evolved into something quite different too, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure did. And I think it's the natural evolution when you're working with amazing IP and creators like I was working with at Cartoon Network to want to be more involved with them. I got to know some of the writers, and at the same time, we were sort of going through this evolution in the gaming industry where many toy manufacturers and other hardware manufacturers were trying to figure out how to continue to get engagement from that younger boy audience. And so I moved into the consumer products team to start managing a games portfolio where we partnered with publishers and we partnered with developers to bring our game IPs to life. That turned into me shipping games on Game Boy Advance and PlayStation 2 and some proprietary hardware from Mattel and Hasbro and others. That really was the sort of the jumping off point in the more traditional video game career.
And just anchor us a little bit. What was some of the IP that you were working with in that era? Some of it is some of the most fun, great IP around.
Well, and also a long time ago. It's probably good to remind your listeners what was going on back in the dark ages.
We have to be historians to some degree, don't we? Yes.
I was there during the time of the Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, Dexter's Laboratory, Ed, Ed, and Eddie. I was part of the team that brought some of the Adult Swim properties to video games, and Ben 10 is another game that I shipped right before I left Cartoon Network. I was there for quite a long time. It was really one of the defining experiences for me in collaboration because there's so many people. You're an IP holder, and then you also have people who are making the show, so you have to collaborate with them to make sure that what you're bringing to life is true to their vision. And you've got developers who need something and direction and feedback, and publishers who have a business to run. So I would say that was probably the beginning of my love of working as a team.
So from Atlanta, and we were overlapping in Atlanta at the time because I was teaching at Georgia Tech, and there was a lot of interchange between Georgia Tech and Turner Media in a variety of ways. I just recall that time as being a really vibrant, creative time in Atlanta. That creative impulse in Atlanta has only accelerated since then. But you made a big move to Seattle at that point, right?
Yeah, I sure did. That move was both exciting and scary because
Yeah.
I grew up in North Carolina. And as you said, being in Atlanta was like being in the big city for
Yeah.
me. And then to think about moving across the country to work for PopCap Games, which is a gamble in and of itself, just to move and then
Yeah.
to try a new studio. And it was on the development side and the IP holder side, right? So I came from Cartoon Network where I knew a lot about taking care of IP, but I was never in it with the development teams because we contracted that work out. And so I was really excited to have the opportunity to be on the ground floor of game development and see how I fared in that realm.
What were the standout experiences that you had at PopCap?
So I joined a team called the Video Game Platform Team,
Yeah.
which at this day and age sounds kind of silly. But because the idea was that we were going to take these beloved games that had been primarily PC and Mac for the PopCap team
Mm,
and translate them into video game platform adaptations. So
yeah.
you might imagine a click wheel iPod or the
Mm,
Nintendo DS or Xbox Live Arcade. Our plan was to say, hey, we know Bejewelled is awesome. How do we take that and get it out into the world in more platforms? So that was my remit. I was
yeah.
also there during the time of Plants vs. Zombies launch. So I helped bring that game to the iPhone, which was really an amazing experience. And so just to be a part of that sort of, we're taking something that was amazing in its own right and finding a new way to express it with the idea of touchscreen or using a stylus on a DS or maybe a multiplayer game like we did for Peggle on Xbox Live Arcade. So it was about adaptation of that original IP.
This is classic right time, right place, but
Yeah.
also right mindset, right disposition. The thing that I've been struck by in our conversations about these years for you is just how adaptive you were and this real learning growth mindset that you brought to it and one of innovation and experimentation, right? Some of these things I'm sure were successful and others were interesting, maybe failures on the face of it, but the learning and what you took with you has turned you into the adaptive experimental leader that you are today.
I think so. I really enjoy learning. It's one of my core values. My husband
Yeah.
and I talk about these core values every year, and we share a love of lifelong learning. And so I'm always up for a challenge. I'm really willing to just put myself out there and say, hey, I don't know the right answer here all the time, but I'm going to at least give it a shot and see if I can make a difference. Another example of that at PopCap was when we were launching Bejewelled Blitz on Facebook, which
Mm,
very few people probably even know about today, but this was the rise of Facebook gaming and live services. And so we were right on the cusp of something new where we had an inventory of things that we had to store for these players, some of which they purchased with microtransactions. So to go through that, how do we make this secure? How do we
mhm.
make sure that we're retaining privacy and continuing to have this in sync across multiple platforms? Because we also launched that game on iPhone, right? There was a lot of interesting challenges in the rise of live service that I'll be honest, I didn't know how to do, but I was willing to tackle and
Yeah.
try to figure it out. And like you said, we made mistakes all along the way. At some point, we lost all the inventory in Bejeweled Blitz because we were trying to figure out how to stand up the backend database and ended up wiping it. So
Wow. So in that era, there were no experts in live services. There were only great learners of live services, and you became one of those people. And then you became an expert. And I don't know that you were expecting to, but live services became rather important for your next gig,
yeah,
which puts you right at the epicenter of not just gaming culture, but of culture. So tell us about what that next experience was, Heather, because it's memorable. Yes.
it is memorable for me and a lot of people in the world. I took a job at Epic Games, and ostensibly, I went to North Carolina, where I now live, to do something a little bit different. I wanted to take my experience as an executive producer and apply that to how we might use the Unreal Engine and other applications. Gaming, obviously, I was more interested in how can we apply it to the healthcare industry or potentially the film industry. And what ended up happening is I joined, and the day before I started, the HR team asked me if I could come in to have a talk with them about potentially working on the Fortnite gaming ecosystem. And at the time, Battle Royale had not yet launched. And so this was just, Fortnite Save the World. And we were working on the idea of Battle Royale. And quite frankly, I resisted in the beginning because I was like, wow, I've been making games for a long time, and I feel like I've got a lot to add creatively and how we might apply those principles to other industries. And lo and behold, as Battle Royale came to market and we realized, wow, we really need some live experience in that team, I ended up taking on the executive producer role of the Fortnite team.
Yeah, amazing. So you couldn't tell that whole story probably in a month because it must have been just so rich and dynamic. But what were some of the things that you would take away from that experience and just say that was life-changing? That was like nothing else I'd ever experienced before. That was the shaping of the culture, because Fortnite Battle Royale was at the epicenter of the culture for a long time and continues to still be. Of course, Fortnite is a global franchise. What were your takeaways from that experience?
It was a rocket like I had never ridden before, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it was an insane time for me. It was an insane time for the whole team. We didn't know what we were going to have when we launched Battle Royale, and then we scaled the team up pretty quickly to be able to respond to the demand. I think the opportunity of being a part of a franchise that is so universally recognized is an experience that I had never had. I mean, people knew Bejewelled, people knew Plants vs. Zombies, but it wasn't like every single person I talked to knew what I was working on, which was quite frankly the case with Fortnite. And then to compound on top of that, you've got late night talk show hosts doing our dances. You've got professional athletes on the sidelines of games talking about how they were playing Fortnite before the game. It was a cultural phenomenon, and it was exhilarating to be a part of where we were going. It was a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it was also incredibly fulfilling to be a part of something that was just taking off in the way that Battle Royale did.
You referenced your values earlier, and you and your husband having this value about learning, which is a powerful value indeed. When you're on a rocket ship like this, like you were on with Fortnite, it seems to me to being anchored in a set of both personal values and probably epic values, I'm sure, was important to ground you in some ways. Did you call upon your values at times when you're on such a rocket ship so that you did find that stability, that foundation that you could operate from?
Yeah, it was not easy, to be frank,
No.
because everyone that was working on Fortnite at that moment in time was so invested,
Yeah.
right? And we were all doing something new that we were passionate about. Quite frankly, we were pioneering how content was delivered and how games were updated. We were so interested in the community, how they were responding to the things that we were doing every day. So if you're asking if I was good at work-life balance at that time, the answer is probably no. I wanted more information. I wanted more player feedback. I wanted more community engagement. And it was so rewarding to see that happening in real time. And so I would say I learned a lot from how to better balance my own boundaries in that time, because it could have completely consumed me. I wanted to be consumed to some degree because it was just so exciting. Also, I had a son, just before I started working on that project. And, you get older and you're like, wait a minute, I want to be home a little bit more. I can't do this forever. It was amazing while it was happening, but I can't do it forever. So
Right.
that led to my changeover to Firaxis.
And so you joined Firaxis after you were at Epic for a couple of years, right? But those were intensive years,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right at the center of things. So you move over to Firaxis, I think originally as COO. From conversations with you, my sense is that was a very values-driven decision, meaning that you were drawn to Firaxis values, the studio's values, and so on. And I wonder if you can speak to those, like what was it that drew you there, besides it obviously being a great studio that made a very successful long-term franchise in Civilization, but what else drew you there?
Like I said, we all go through the evolution in life where our job is our identity, right? Especially when you're younger, you have more time to dedicate to it. Your friends are generally with you in the office. And as I had a child and we moved back to North Carolina and I was closer to my family, I felt like I really want to work at a place that gives me the space to be able to be present in those communities, right? My family, my friends, the community itself. Part of the decision to move to Firaxis was really based on the value set that I had always heard heard so much about in the Firaxis culture. Firaxis has been around for 30 years.
Right.
And for a studio to survive for that long, especially in a volatile industry like the video games industry, I figured they had to be doing something right. And so I had a couple of great conversations with folks that were there, and it was true. The culture at Firaxis is very supportive, very engaging, and I wanted to work with people that shared similar values to me and that I liked working with, right? Like you get to a point in your life where it's like, I want to be around people every single day that see the world similarly. And I
Yeah.
felt like Firaxis was that place for me.
A couple of years into your time as COO, you had the opportunity to become studio head. I want to talk about the difference between being a studio head and being a leader, because I think it is really quite different. So you had these classic progression of responsibilities and growth and so on in different places and so on. Really core leadership roles at a place like Epic and driving this historic experience with Fortnite. So what's the difference between being a leader and the leader for you? And what's the difference between being that studio head that responsible for everything, essentially accountable for everything, as opposed to being a more focused leader?
I don't find it to be that much
No.
different, truly. I try to be authentic in how
Hmm.
I show up at work every single day. I
Yeah.
try to adhere to my values and to the values of our studio. To me, the thing that really stood out was like, wow, now I'm the one. Like, it's my responsibility to make sure that Firaxis is an incredible studio 30 years from now. The sense of responsibility and history, right? There's a weight of history there that's like, wow, the studio has done such incredible things over such a long period of time. I didn't want to be the studio head that messed that up. And so there's pressure. Certainly, I rely on my team heavily. I don't design video games, right? I can't be the one that does the heavy lifting in terms of what our games become in the future. I truly believe that with a shared value set and with an approach that empowers those creative people around you, you're going to get great results. To me, showing up as the same person every day is what I endeavor to do. I think maybe it's more about the internal pressure that I put on myself to make sure that I was doing right by Firaxis for the future.
Yeah, you're running a long relay race, aren't you, of leadership? And when you say 30 years, a game studio for 30 years, for many industries, that would be like being a 100-year-old company. I mean,
Yes.
it's almost unheard of, right?
Mm.
There's so much dynamism and change in the industry. Along with that, you inherited a world famous beloved franchise in Civilization as well. So not just the studio, but also a game that, there are a lot of beloved franchises, but I am not aware of a player community that loves its franchise more than the Civilization community. If there is one, I want to meet them. As you say, there's some pressure that's attached to that. What I think that's very interesting about your specific challenge is the Civilization game team as you were approaching building Civilization 7, which was the latest installment in your franchise, is how do we honor this incredible history and then also how do we innovate? How do we evolve a franchise? And there's a titration that happens, there's a synthesis that happens there. I'm just curious how you and your team thought about that and how you approached it. We'll talk more about like there were things that worked really well and there were things that you guys had to adjust as you did it.
In a beautiful and poetic way, Civilization 7 is the culmination of
Mm.
everything that I had learned throughout my career. I didn't know it was going to be that way. But when I stepped into an organization that had beloved IP, that was no different than Cartoon Network or PopCap or Epic, even, right? And so that idea of being the steward of a brand, of a franchise, of being a part of something that is so deeply loved by our fans and our community, that felt very natural. And then to be able to apply the concepts of listening to those fans, evolving our game experience, really trying to continue to elicit that like emotional connection to that brand through the interactive entertainment that we build every day felt supernatural. While it was a new role for me, the mesh of IP stewardship and live operations felt really organic and easy to come by.
I wonder if you could just describe. So, what were the ways that you, of course, you're going to credit the team first, the creative team with the innovations, but there were changes to the way that the game was played. There were things that you guys did to try to respond to a different gaming ecosystem and evolving players and so on. And so, I wonder if you could speak to what some of those aspirations were and what your vision for that change was.
Yeah, as you said, I don't design the video games that
No.
Firaxis releases. So credit is due to Ed Beach and his team and how they think about the creative direction
Yeah.
of Civ 7. I will say that every time we make a new game, we take a risk. We want to innovate. We want to try something new. We want to give ourselves space to evolve the formula, for lack of a better way to put it. And we are able to do that because we have really smart designers who have a hypothesis, we bring it to life, and then we're able to adapt it with player feedback. And that's exactly what we did. We made some changes to the core formula of Civilization game progression. They weren't universally well received, and it made it easy for us to then say, okay, let's quickly stand up a feature workshop and have the opportunity to listen to our players. We brought 5,000 players in to an unreleased build, released 2 or 3 different rounds of changes to actually get to a place that we very proudly released a month ago. And that's our test of time update for Civilization 7. And so it's just, again, the principles are all still the same, right? You're never going to hit a home run 100% of the time. When you don't, the best you can do is lean back into your community and understand where their needs are not being met and create a construct for your team to listen and interact and have that virtuous cycle of communication so you can improve it.
What you're describing there to me is, as you say, you're not at the center of the creative leadership team, but your experience over all of the instances that we explored already, the culmination of all of those experiences allowed you to lead and head a process that brought all of that learning together. Right? All of that learning orientation, that core value that you mentioned earlier. It seems to me that the studios and the game orgs that are most successful today and will be most successful going forward are those that are responsive to their community and respond in ways that honor the community, but also challenge it and kind of push it, but not too far because you don't want to push your community away, right? And so
Correct.
what you're describing is a process of a dialogue of this kind of listening, and we're going to bring up the best of our creativity, but we want to be responsive to the way that you love to play the game, and we're going to mingle those together. Then that becomes a question of judgment and taste and how far can we push the innovation? How much do we need to lean in to the tradition of the game? It's a truly adaptive leadership challenge. It's not just a technical challenge. It's a challenge of learning and responsiveness. And it seems to me that you guys have really modeled that for what a successful process like that looks like.
I cannot understate how important it is to just name that, right?
Yes,
At
right.
Firaxis, we talk about having an adaptable mindset. We
Yeah.
talk about having a flexible product strategy. These are words that we use frequently within our studio because it is important to give permission to people to fail. If you fail and do nothing, that to me is like, oh, well, you've given up. But everybody fails. And so if you're going to fail and then you're going to learn and then you're going to listen and then you're going to do something different the next time, that's what being adaptable means. That's what being flexible means. The best thing that we can do, I mean, we're here at the pleasure of all of our fans and community, right? And so the best thing that we can do is create a way to have that conversation around what is it that we're actually trying to deliver. We shipped 19 patches in a little less than 9 months. And for Firaxis, that's unprecedented, right?
Wow.
And that is not a thing we had done in the past. And then to have the guts to put a build out to our community before we ever even launched it and make change after change after change just led us to a refinement that I think we wouldn't have accomplished had we not been flexible and adaptable and willing to have that conversation with our fans.
I think that of all of the, call it creative tech art forms that are out there, I think that there's a very strong case to be made that games are the most ambitious and complex genre or form.
I
And
agree, Daryl. I always say it's a miracle that any
yeah,
game gets made because there are
totally.
so many people with
Yeah,
so many points of view, with
that's
so
right.
many skill sets that have to converge on something that's beautiful and whole.
It,
And it's a miracle.
when I started working with game leaders, it's been a while now. I don't want to date myself, but it's been a while. I started hearing the same word over and over and over again. And the word was dependency, dependency, dependency. And I was like, Oh, all of these dependencies of the different parts of the game making process. And what I think is interesting, and you were right at the center of this with Fortnite, you continued it with Civ, is the collaboration and coordination of game teams is so demanding, so complex. Really accomplished producers figure out how to make that happen. For instance, really accomplished studio heads figure out how to do that. What's added into the mix now is the game communities have become the other collaborator. Like they are a collaborator with game studios now. And the game studios that figure out how to extend collaboration to their community, which I think is what you've done, they have an edge going forward, I believe. And this adaptability, this learning growth mindset, it's so core, I think, to ongoing success because the acceleration of change in the industry is only going to continue. It's not going to slow down.
And also it's boring.
Yeah,
it's boring to do the same.
That's
it's
right.
boring to
It's
do
boring.
the same thing all
Yes.
the time.
That's
right.
right.
So
That's right.
when we learn something new, it is more fun to try it out. And
No
again,
question.
like you can't be flexible and adaptable and also be risk averse, right?
No.
These are the really important points that I
Right.
think a lot of people miss, that
Yeah.
if you're willing to change your mind, you have to be willing to be wrong sometimes. And then
Yes.
admit when you're wrong because we're not always right. The important part of this is take the risk, be willing to innovate, and then have a conversation about where you hit and where you missed,
Yeah.
and then adapt. Don't be mad along the way because, like I said, you're never going to bat 1,000.
Well, you certainly modeled this adaptability and this learning mindset throughout your whole career. And then now you've gotten a chance to scale it essentially in terms of becoming studio head and so on. And, from my perspective as a coach that works with game leaders is that I just love to see that trajectory, which you fit that model perfectly. We were preparing for this conversation and we did a lot of retrospective today. We've talked a lot about the present at Firaxis and what you guys have done most recently and, amazing effort on Civ 7. But now it's like, well, Heather, what are you excited about going forward?
I think professionally, it's such a privilege to lead the Firaxis team. We have so many great ideas of how to continue to bring the strategy genre to new levels of audiences and integration with how we're thinking about the future of ongoing content development and community interaction. So professionally, there's lots of great things to come from Firaxis.
Yeah.
And then personally, I have a 12-year-old son. And so to watch that next generation of gamer in action every day, to interact with him, I think we're in for a wild ride. Like I can't, some days I can't even imagine what it's going to look like for him to be 20 years old and have had an impact on this industry that I've been in my entire life, right? I watch the way he plays. I watch the way that he interacts with his friends on Discord and other platforms. I watch how he engages. He plays on a keyboard and mouse and he's 12. This evolution of gaming as a part of your everyday life is such a thing that this generation, that's always been there. It's always been there for this generation. And I feel like that's the first time in history we will have seen the impact that that will have on our craft. And so I'm really excited to get to be a part of that.
Yeah, well, everything old is new again. So if you think back to the beginning of our conversation today, when you joined Cartoon Network, you're like, well, we have this 9 to 14-year-old problem of like boys not loving to read. So we have to find other ways to reach them. And so now you bring that, not problem, but opportunity home with your one-man focus group and all of his constellation of friends and so on. And so, and you don't even, well, you do have to pay for that focus group.
Oh, trust me, I do in more ways.
You pay in other ways. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what games is he most excited about playing right now? If he was 13, I wouldn't ask this question, but he's 12. And so we get him before he's a teenager.
His current focus is Rocket League. He wants to get into the Rocket League Championship Series.
Okay.
So he has been training diligently every day. He's made it to Diamond. So he's very excited about that. He wants to be in a platform where his friends are. So if his friends are playing Roblox, he's there. If they're playing Minecraft, he's there. If they are playing Fortnite, he's there. So I think the just like inherent social nature of his gaming is so obvious to me.
Well, I'm glad that he's following in his mother's footsteps and maybe a gaming career is ahead of him, maybe as first as a player and then maybe as a creator. Heather, this has been so much fun talking with you and hearing an amazing story about your career in gaming. And the story's not over. It continues to unfold and pass down to a next generation. Thank you for joining the pod today. We didn't mention this, but you're celebrating some hallmark anniversaries for both the studio and for the game. Do you want to just describe those briefly?
Yeah, sure. We
Yeah.
just hit our 30th anniversary for Firaxis
Yeah.
Studios. That happened in the beginning of May. We
Oh,
had a big celebration. We call it our Firaxis Vision Summit. And we do it every year where we bring all of our team and studio in from around the world and meet together in Maryland and have a week of celebration and vision setting and goal setting for the fiscal year. So that was really exciting. We updated our logo. We've got a whole new website. And
yeah.
then, believe it or not, the 35th anniversary of Civilization as a
Wow.
franchise is coming up this September. So it has been a year full of celebration for us at Firaxis.
Well, congratulations. You're running a good relay race here. And those are amazing studio and game to steward. But it's been really our honor to spend time with you today, and we had a lot of fun.
Thank you, Daryl. I
Yeah.
also had a great time. Good
Yeah.
talking to you.